Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Donald Wallenfang. It's been a while since I've been live streaming on this YouTube channel, and it's a pleasure to be back. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to resume discussion on my 2017 book, Human and Divine Being, but not so much on my book, but the work of St. Edith Stein. Edith Stein on the human soul. And so this is really an amazing woman to study, all that she wrote, all of her work. And in this presentation, we want to think along with her about the human soul in terms of its free will, its intelligence, and all of its various capacities to synthesize memory over the course of a lifetime. Even with all these changes of the human body, the human soul, the substantial spiritual nature of the soul remains constant. It too undergoes change, but we might wonder what makes a human being who he or she is over the course of time when there's so many changes to the body. And what is the spiritual core of the person that keeps steady? That is the personal foundation of this rational being we call human. So I want to keep thinking together from human and divine being, and beginning with a quote from Edith Stein's book, Finite and Eternal Being, and then continue to unpack it from there. So feel free to comment in the chat and let me know how is the audio quality, the video quality, what's going on. So this quote from Finite and Eternal Being, Edith Stein writes, "In man, we might equate the core and soul, the core of the being, we might equate the core of human being with the soul. The body itself is not the core, but the physical and material extension of the spiritual core of the person. So what we mean by soul is the spiritual core, what makes up someone's individual being and shapes him or her inside out, and at the same time open in his inner life for himself and open for taking in the world spiritually." So this is something us human beings do. We take in the world spiritually in terms of meaning, in terms of affectivity or emotion, in terms of concepts, in terms of number, in terms of abstracting from the matter. We turn and face it. We set our sense experience and all that it gives to the spiritual processing of our soul. We set that all at arm's reach. We turn and face it. And we take in the world, therefore, spiritually, not just physically, in terms of sense data, and react to the sense data in a more animal-like fashion out of instinctive behavioral responses. But as the human being processes the world, we consider meanings, not just sensations. Our perception is coordinated symbolically, metaphorically, analogically, thinking over the whole course of human development and what goes on from infancy into adulthood. Human beings, we have this potency, this capacity to do these things when it's not inhibited in different ways. And so the full flowering of these potencies, the full actualization of these potencies, we're talking about what's going on in the soul and its ability to exercise its higher faculties of intellect, memory, and the will, in concert with the lower faculties of sense perception, affectivity, and all the things connected more immediately to the needs of the body, involuntary needs of the body. So Edith Stein is really dissecting the total anatomy of the human being, both in terms of body and soul. So she says further, it is his distinctive human soul that makes man a spiritually personal being, that makes him a person. So this language of personhood really comes to us through Christianity, especially thinking about who is Jesus of Nazareth, and all of these ecumenical councils of the bishops of the church, especially beginning in 325 with Nicaea, and we'll be celebrating the 1700 anniversary of this council this year, 2025. And 1700 years ago, this language in Greek of prosopon or hypostasis in relation to the phusein, the two natures of Jesus that are held together in the singularity of his hypostasis, his personhood, who is the second person of the Trinity. But we are made in the image of God as human beings, especially because of our rational souls. It's not just because we have bodies that have these different parts made up of atoms and molecules, different kinds of material structures, but what makes us in the imago Dei, the image of God, is our rational nature in all of its potencies, to be able to think, to be able to will, to be able to choose, to decide, even for or against God, and also this capacity to love and to be loved, to be able to recognize the whole of reality as gift, one's own existence as gift from one moment to the next. I didn't give myself being, yet here I am. It has been given to me, yet again in this new moment. And all the world that surrounds me too is gift. Everything altogether is gift. So the human soul is what makes the human being a personal being. Stein says further that the soul makes his entire organism of body and soul different from the animals. For by such a spiritual personal soul dwelling in them, body and soul are in a way spiritually open and free, and hence shaped personally. Open and free. She uses this language. When we think about our common humanity, is this not the case? There is an openness about our lived experience, open to the world, to receive the world as it gives itself, to use phenomenological language, as it gives itself to this 0 point of orientation that we call the self. The I, the ego, the I experiences the world from one moment to the next as a deluge, a flood of givenness. And it is this conscious openness, this openness to life, to the world, to meaning, to possibility, that we might call receptivity. The receptivity of the rational personal being receives the world in a personal way, in a personalized way that is irreducible to the various needs, urges, exigencies of the body, which are always there. Yes, they're there. I hope to eat lunch in about 15, 20 minutes, and I look forward to it. But the whole of my existence can't be reduced to finding food and drink, though this is important. But what I'm even more concerned about is meaning. Why I even want to do this YouTube video. because I believe I exist to evangelize, to share the good news of Jesus Christ and his church, to search for the truth. So this YouTube channel is called The Mendicant Philosopher, beginning with philosophy, though not ending there. Seeking the truth together, that will take us into the realm of theology, that will take us into the realm of divine revelation, questions about God and how God reveals himself to us. This to me is more important than food. If I missed my lunch today and even my dinner, to me, truth is more nourishing than physical food. And yes, it might be easy for me to say because I have meals waiting. But I would like to think if they were taken from me, if I was struggling to afford them, and I can tell you there have been times in my life where I was counting my pennies and maybe not eating the menu of my choice. And this could happen at any time as change happens in life. But in any case, my point is that what is of greatest significance to me is meaning, is truth, more than the food I eat, the water I drink. And I see that the reason I drink and I eat is to fuel this passionate pursuit of truth all the way in this life. So to join you through YouTube in this channel, it's a great gift. It's a great privilege. And to be able to pursue these things together. So if you have questions, if you have comments, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I love to interact more. As we think about the work of St. Edith Stein featured in this book, Human and Divine Being, a study on the theological anthropology of Edith Stein. So she's thinking about the human soul. And if someone were to ask me, what is the human soul? Tell me in 30 seconds or less. I could try my best. But that's what books are for. 3 chapters dedicated to the human soul, following chapters on the question of human vocation, the question of spiritual being. I've done many live streams in the past on those first 2 chapters of this book, but now in the thick of chapter 3, examining the soul as the form of the body. What makes this body alive? The soul. What is the event of death? The soul and the body have separated. There's still a body there, then we call it a corpse because it's no longer animated by the anima, that is the Latin word for soul. So we're investigating the human soul, and again, it's a challenge to talk about that which is doing the talking from the inside out. So we do our best with Edith Stein, and she gives us so many great things to think about. So following this quote, thinking about the soul as both open and free. How is the human soul free? We say we have free will. We're not compelled to do this or that. We don't act just out of mechanical instinct, but we get to choose. I can choose to pick up this other book right here. I chose to do that. Nothing's forcing me to. I'm not a puppet on a string. And I can choose to place the book back down here on the desk. I can choose to make this YouTube video. I can choose to formulate another sentence and share it. We take all this for granted most of the time. But if we put it all at arm's reach, it's a miraculous thing that's happening. This free will that in itself is not freedom. Free will is a capacity to live into freedom, to grow into freedom by choosing what is good. This is the classic metaphysical truth. It is the first principle of practical reason. Do good and avoid evil. And the more that you do good and avoid evil, the freer you will become. The freer you will become. The freer we become in choosing good over and over again with consistency. And all the more so if we bring in theology and say that our free choosing the good is animated by grace, by divine assistance, by the third person of the Trinity, God the Holy Spirit and his sevenfold gifts at work within us to choose the good habitually, and then to animate all the virtues, cardinal virtues, theological virtues, and all their extensions. So the soul, what we mean by the soul is this intrinsic capacity of the rational person to be open in relation to the world, to be free in relation to the world, to be free to search for the truth. That's what we hope to do here together. Thanks so much for joining me in this search for the fullness of truth together, not being content with just a piece, with just a part, with just a fragment, but we want the whole enchilada. We want this fullness of truth, which we believe will set us free, will set us free in love and responsibility for the other person who faces me. So this openness Stein talks about does not refer merely to sensation of that which is not oneself, but to the conscious activity of personal spiritual being. So, for instance, the virtue of self-mastery exercised from the core of a personal being, able to channel and integrate all urges and desires according to ultimate ends of action. I agree. Thank you for sharing. We need more empathy in the world. Yes, indeed. You know how tragic it is to hear about ongoing wars and bombings and all of these things. When the first thing we should be doing and what we should be doing instead is real negotiation, taking time to listen to each other, to work out rational and mutually beneficial agreements as persons, as families, as tribes, as nations. And so what we're talking about here with Edith Stein is a way to build peace in the world, to build bridges of peace in the world, and finding ways to do that. And so what we're talking about right here, self-mastery, to be able to be patient, to wait for the word of the other, to try to seek to understand the other first, and to work at this. Communication is a great adventure. And sometimes someone might say something that I don't quite understand right away, or what I thought they said wasn't what they meant. And so I need to ask again, what do you mean by that? Could you say more about that? Can we have this open dialogue that's respectful, that's dignified, that values the person as an ultimate moral end of action? That never should the human person be a means to an end, but always an end in him or herself. Yes, we should learn from history and both its light and its shadows, how to act today. And the danger of not learning from history is we repeat the same mistakes. So continuing to study the history of humanity and to commit to being peacemakers in this world. We want to build relationships of peace, communities of peace, and that word, we never should tire of peace. And as Pope Paul VI said in the Catholic Church, if we want peace, we must work for justice, giving each one his or her due. This is what we need to do. And so we can do this by study, like we're doing with the work of Edith Stein, but moreover by prayer. We can cry out to God, asking God to intervene in our situations, but asking for the power of God, the God of peace, to be at work in all of these various tribulations and calamities, things going on. Because sometimes things have gotten so bad that only God can save us, can repair us, can give this grace that we can't find even within ourselves to exercise. But this grace that we welcome, that animates us toward a fuller peace than even our best intentions. So this is where philosophy and theology come together in a great unity, seeking that fullness of truth. The rational soul rises above instinctual behavior. We can be better than animals. We can be better than a dog-eat-dog world. We can be better than a zero-sum game. We can be better than retaliation and vengeance. Thanks so much. Welcome back. You too, Gabrielle. So the rational soul rises above instinctual behavior by ascending to the heights of interpersonal being, interdependence, as personal spiritual beings, living not only according to the self-consumed conatus essendi, this Latin phrase that means the struggle for being, the battle for being, that is my own being, finding my own place in the sun. Instead of this egocentric, self-referential, self-absorbed worldview, we can ascend to the heights as rational souls by living for the other in the form of radical self-donation. This is so beautiful. Okay, so this is coming from the gospel of Jesus Christ. This way of being that is not oriented around the self. It involves the self, but the self comes to the full flowering of its being through self-forgetfulness in living in radical love and responsibility for the other person who faces me. The self becomes itself by giving itself away in healthy relationships. Yes, with boundaries and all decorum and discretion and propriety. But nevertheless, with fidelity to the other, the situation of the other, the suffering of the other. So thank you for your question, Ian. Structurally, what does the soul's final self-realization or perfection look like? Thinking metaphysically. Recently, I've been reading and teaching the works of St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, St. Therese of Lisieux, St. Edith Stein. They're all Carmelites in the Catholic tradition. They entered religious life, and they devoted their lives to thinking about this kind of question. What does the soul's final self-realization or perfection look like? They use that word, perfection. St. Teresa of Avila wrote a work called El Camino de Perfección, the way of perfection. And it's the perfection of love. It has to do with the relationship between persons, human, angelic, and divine. So in Catholic teaching, we talk about the communion of angels and saints and communion with the Most Holy Trinity and the union between the soul and God. That's the words we would use to best describe what does this look like. The soul's ultimate self-realization. And it's not a realization that happens by the self for itself. It depends on the other. It depends on the other human facing me in this ethical interpersonal relationship, as well as the holy other who we call divinity, God, facing me, revealing his face to me gradually, mysteriously, but truly. So this movement toward unity of persons, communion of persons, this is something both Pope Francis and the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, have underscored in their papal teachings. This cosmic movement, this global movement toward unity It's Pope Leo's papal motto, moving toward this oneness without losing the distinctiveness of the particularity of our individual personhood. So the Christian concept is not the Buddhist one called shunyata, where there's a kind of gradual dissolution of the self or a total annihilation of the self and an escape from suffering, but rather in Christianity it's the idea, it's the proclamation that we move together in genuine unity because of genuine plurality, that we don't get a real unity unless there's a diversity of parts, a diversity of members, a plurality of persons that subsists as the unity comes together. Because without that plurality of persons, we wouldn't have unity. We would have just uniformity or homogeneity, and that's not the most divine meaning of one. The most divine meaning of one, more akin to the Hindu notion of Advaita, the Advaita intuition, is a paradoxical reality where there is oneness because there is plurality, and there's plurality because there's oneness. And in Christianity, this is realized in the flesh, in the concrete, in lived history. And the one God who is at once three persons becomes part of creation, becomes human, the second person of the Trinity, God the Son, the eternal Son of the Father, becomes human through the yes, the welcome of the Blessed Virgin Mary, as we read about in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 1. And this is how God redeems the universe that God makes, that God sustains. He enters into it intimately. As the German poet Hölderlin wrote, not to encompass the greatest, but to let oneself be encompassed by the smallest. This is divine. And this is what God does. And Jesus, who is God in the flesh, who suffers with us, who is tortured with us, who is abused with us, who is imprisoned with us, who is rejected with us, who is denied with us. There he is, right along with us. Emmanuel, God with us, who dies with us, who descends into the dark abyss of death with us, so that we could rise with him. And all of the things I've read and learned and talked to people about, listened to throughout my life, there's no more divine revelation than this one. So thank you again for your question, Ian. Given St. Edith Stein's work on the soul, do I believe that souls are gendered? Yes. Yes, I do. I don't talk about that enough in this book. I wrote this, it was published in 2017, and it was coming together some years prior to that, like 8 years or something. So I was a lot younger when I wrote this book, and and that question wasn't at the front of my mind at the time. I think I kind of assumed, yes, souls are uh, gendered, so to speak, but also sexually constituted according to the principle of totality of the human nature, which is at once body and soul. So in as much as there are male and female bodies, there's male and female souls that are united to those male and female bodies. And John Paul II, in his Theology of the Body work, suggests that in the resurrection, we will be raised male and female. And so the human soul, we can talk about it more generically, or in a sense, I don't like this word, but more androgynously, And that's what I tend to do in this book, talking about the human soul as such, whether male or female. There's things that are universal in either case: rationality, openness, freedom, as Stein is talking about. But in terms of how an individual person expresses him or herself, the sexual constitution is a sine qua non of that expression. And this is something we can keep thinking about more without drifting into unwarranted stereotypes or caricatures. But Edith Stein, in her book Essays on Woman, I think is one of the best works that gets at the peculiarities of the masculine soul and the feminine soul. Each one of these distinct from the other and in relation to each other, through a sexual and psychological complementarity of persons. So her book, Essays on Woman, highly recommend. Also a book by one of her good friends named Gertrude von Lefort, a little book she wrote called The Eternal Woman. This is also an excellent work, very intuitive, mystical even, but really getting at the truth, I think, of this question. Are human souls, again, the word gender can be a little more fluid, I think, than sex, sexuality, sexual identity, in terms of the givenness of the body as male or female, and the unity of the body and the soul. Again, in Catholicism, we talk about the principle of totality, that we cannot segregate the objective dimensions of the bodily being of a person from the subjective dimensions of the spiritual, psychological soul of the person, that these form a unity. And so the soul expresses itself in and through the givenness of a masculine body or the givenness of a feminine body. So as you say, you just started her book, The Veil of Veronica, last night. Very beautiful. Yes, so there's so many great thinkers we can think along with. That's the key, is to find these texts that resonate, radiate with truth, this fullness of truth. I think Edith Stein's writings are among those, and I consider myself to be a disciple of hers, of course, of Christ and his mother, but all these saints, Thomas Aquinas, Edith Stein, John Paul II, Augustine, Catherine of Siena, the list goes on and on and on. And I want to be in their company. I want to place myself in their company, so I'm going to read their works. I'm going to devour them. I'm going to think along with them. And I want my mind to be formed according to their pedagogy, their instruction. And I entrust myself to their tutelage. Man, Edith Stein, that's why I had to write a book on her theological anthropology, because as I read more and more of her work, I'm just more and more convinced she's hitting the nail on the head. You know, she's on target, and I think the proof is in the pudding. Not only in the coherence and intelligibility of what she's saying, but in the heroic virtue of her own life. And that's what I always like to put together when considering who should I read, who should I think along with, who should I follow. It's people who walk the talk in their lives all the way to the end. You know, like Socrates, for example. They were so serious about what they were saying, they staked their life on their testimony. And their verbal testimony, their oral testimony, their written testimony flowed out of the concreteness and the um, integrity of their lives. So their lives themselves were living testimonies to truth. So Thank you again for your comment, Ian. You read Pierre-Marie Emonet on the soul as causal principle of the body. He writes beautifully about how the various parts are caused by the soul. So it would seem that the soul is gendered. Yeah, I have to check that out. Pierre-Marie Emonet, thank you for recommending it. The soul as the causal principle of the body. I love how you put that. And I think that's exactly another way we can think about the soul. The causal principle of the body, as the Catholic Church defines anima for anima, the soul is the form of the body. Anima forma corporis, that's the Latin. Anima forma corporis. So this sounds like Emonet says something very similar. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here with me. I see more have joined the live stream. Maybe I'd go for just a few more minutes. If you have comments, questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm about to take a lunch break here, but a joy to be back on YouTube after like a year hiatus. I just turn my attention to other work, other things going on, and sometimes it's healthy to take a little break from these kind of platforms and projects. But I'm jumping back on because I felt moved by the Spirit to do so. So I'm Dr. Donald Wallenfang, and I teach philosophy and theology at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. I work with other various apostolates like the Benedictine Institute for Women. You can check these out online. A lot of good things happening in these different apostolates and ministries. But I just praise God that my life has developed, has evolved to be able to do things like this for my work even. And I don't evangelize in order to exist. I exist in order to evangelize. And it's just, what do I mean by evangelize? Sharing the truth that I've received as I've come to know it. And talking about it. Why not? I can't stand going through this life without talking about these things. This is a platform to do that. And so I thank you for your presence, for your interest, and how wonderful it is to mutually encourage each other in this pursuit of the fullness of truth. There's all these different values in life that we run after. But I think it's important that we make sure that we prioritize the values according to what we could say the divinely ordained hierarchy of values. So things like wealth and honor and pleasure and power are not absolute. They're not worth living and dying for. But other things are, like love, responsibility, God and God's revelation. Those things of deepest substance tethered to eternity. And it takes courage to pursue these things day in and day out. It takes courage to ask deep questions. It takes courage to wrestle with this whole that is too saturating for any one of us to wrap our minds around. So again, thank you all for joining me here. I love reading your comments. I love reading your affirmations. There's a lot of other videos on this channel you can go back and look at. There's some different podcast episodes, a lot of live streams from the past, other mini courses. And yeah, it is empathetic of you to be present here. And I really appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to spend with me in this live stream. That's why I went on it. I finished up other work and I'm ready to teach my class later today, all prepared. And I had about 45 minutes to spare. And I said, I want to go back on YouTube I want to share some things about the work of Edith Stein, and that's what I hope to do, session to session, video to video, taking up a text, talking about it together, thinking about these things together. Yes, truth feels oh so good. That's well put. Thank you for sharing that. It does. It does feel good to live in the truth rather than lies or obscurity or confusion or a foggy haze of ambiguity. The truth reveals itself to us. The truth must be personal because we are persons. So we're not content for impersonal truth. We want the fullness of personalized truth. And that's why it takes us not just to abstract concepts, but to a living relationship with truth who has a face and a name. And in our languages around the world, we call this one God, Dios, Allah, Elohim. What other names? God, divinity, the source, the cause of our being, because we know without a doubt that we did not cause ourselves. So we seek divinity, not as an abstract concept, but as alive, not as a being, but as being itself, metaphysically. God is more so a verb than a noun, like us. Yeah, as you say, grandfather in the sky for some seekers of divinity. And there's a lot of commonalities across cultures in seeking for God, seeking the face of God. But what we need to attend to then beyond philosophy and beyond comparative theology is seeking for how God has truly revealed himself to human beings gradually over the course of history. And yes, we examine the various religious traditions of the world and we can learn something from all of them. But we look for the narrative, the manifestation, the proclamation, the divine revelation that we would call paradigmatic, that gives itself to us as what is most essential to being a person, to being alive, to being rational, and to be met with the vocation to love. What proposal of divine revelation shows us best of all this love as gift, this love as sacrifice, this God who enters the fray with us, to do life with us, to suffer with us, to give us strength, to give us peace, to give us consolation all the way through death, and offers eternal life, resurrected life that has to do with the whole of our nature, that respects the integrity of the individual person, that adheres to the exigencies of metaphysics, of intelligent philosophy. What is the proposal of divine revelation that meets all these kinds of criteria? This is what we need to keep considering and do so in an interdisciplinary way. And I would propose Catholicism is that way. Within Catholicism, the Judeo-Christian tradition, is that proposal of divine revelation that fits like a hand in a glove, that fits like the glass slipper on Cinderella's foot. It's a perfect match for all of our heart's desires. It's a perfect fulfillment of all desire. And so I rejoice in this revelation that comes through the Catholic faith, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and I continue to point to it, to learn from her. and to live it by God's grace. So thank you for joining me today. It's been a great time together. I look forward to more times in the future as the Spirit leads. Leave comments if you would on any videos on my YouTube channel, or reach out in any way to communicate with me through there. Keep the conversation going. Thank you again for joining with me, and I hope you have a really blessed day. Maybe you're about to eat lunch like me, thanks be to God, for the gifts of this food and this life, and the purpose that He has created for each one of us, an unrepeatable mission and purpose in this life that you alone can do. May we all continue to think toward the whole, to pray from the heart, and to live as a witness. We'll see you in the next one.